I pulled up to the driveway just a couple of minutes past 6 a.m. when my mum appeared on the porch with her suitcase in hand. "You're late," she said, her voice too cheerful for the situation. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 6:02 a.m., just 2 minutes behind. "Mom," I replied, forcing a smile as I got out of the car to help with the luggage. But then, I saw her. My sister Lauren was stepping out of the house with her suitcase as well. My smile faltered. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mum turned to me, her smile wide and too bright. "Oh, Violet, we decided Lauren should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately and really needs this trip." My chest tightened. "Instead of me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Mum, I've been planning this for years. I paid for everything." She waved a hand dismissively, like my years of planning were insignificant. "We're grateful, sweetheart, but you're always working so hard. You can take another trip later. Lauren really needs this right now." Lauren didn't even look guilty. Instead, she gave me a fake smile, shifting her weight and saying, "Thanks for understanding, sis," with a tone dripping in insincerity. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at them. A moment later, Dad shuffled out, avoiding eye contact, handing me his suitcase. "This is unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking. "This was supposed to be our trip, something for me to share with you." Mom smiled almost too brightly. "Well, it still is, Violet, just with Lauren instead. Don't make this a big deal. Your sister really needs a break." For the past 2 years, I'd worked overtime, saved every penny, and meticulously planned every detail for this trip. Flights, luxury hotels, guided tours, and even dinner reservations. But as I stood there watching Lauren get into the back seat of my car, I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. No matter what I did, Lauren would always come first in their eyes. I clenched my jaw, biting back the retort that almost slipped out and forced a tight smile. "Let's go then," I said, my voice flat. If they wanted to prioritize her over me, fine. They could go with her, but I wasn't about to let them enjoy it. The drive to the airport was suffocatingly quiet, save for Lauren's non-stop chatter. "Oh my gosh, Mom, did you see that TikTok about Paris? I can't wait to go shopping there. Do you think we'll have time for that, or will the tours take up the whole day?" My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I kept my gaze straight ahead, fighting the urge to say anything. My mum chuckled softly. "Of course we'll have time. We'll figure it out when we get there." I bit down on the inside of my cheek. When we get there, they hadn't even noticed I wasn't part of their little "we" anymore. At one point, Dad cleared his throat. "Thank you for driving us, Violet. I know this might feel a little strange." Strange was an interesting way to describe it. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, but he didn't respond, just shifted uncomfortably in his seat, probably regretting having said anything at all. Lauren leaned forward from the back seat, her voice grating. "You're not mad, right? I mean, this is a big deal. I could never have afforded this on my own." I clenched my jaw and forced a tight smile. "Of course, Lauren. Enjoy the trip." By the time we reached the airport drop-off zone, my patience was nearly gone. As I helped unload their luggage, Mum pulled me into a hug. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. This means so much to us. And to Lauren." I nodded stiffly. "Sure, Mom." Lauren gave me a bright smile as she wheeled her suitcase toward the entrance. "Thanks, Violet, you're the best." I stood there watching them disappear into the terminal, feeling a tight knot in my chest, anger and hurt mixing together. The drive home was a blur. I replayed the conversation over and over in my mind, each word cutting deeper than the last. "This means a lot to Lauren. You're not mad, right? You're always working so hard." I parked in the driveway and sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. Then, without a second thought, I marched inside, pulled out my laptop and logged into every travel account I'd used to book the trip. Hotel reservations cancelled, tours refunded. Airline upgrades gone. I stared at the confirmation emails piling up in my inbox, feeling the tightness in my chest begin to ease. They wanted Lauren instead of me. Fine. But they wouldn't be staying in five-star hotels or enjoying private tours on my dime. When I closed the laptop, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. They could explain themselves to the front desk in Paris. I was done being their doormat. The calls started as soon as their flight landed. My phone buzzed constantly as I unpacked the suitcase I'd packed so carefully for a trip that was no longer mine. The irony wasn't lost on me as I hung up my dresses and neatly arranged my shoes. The buzzing continued, relentless and annoying. I sighed, picked up the phone and saw my mum's name flash across the screen, with several missed calls and texts. I unlocked the phone and scrolled through the messages. "Violet, what's going on?" "The hotel won't let us check in. The reservation is missing. Call me immediately." "Violet, this isn't funny. Fix this now." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Fix this? After what they'd done, did they really think I'd swoop in and save the day? The phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Lauren. I let it ring out, and she left a voicemail. "Violet, this is so petty," she snapped, her voice dripping with entitlement. "We're stuck here because of you. You need to call the hotel and fix it now." I rolled my eyes and deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. For years, I had been their go-to fixer, the one who smoothed over every mistake and cleaned up every mess. Not anymore. Eventually, I decided to answer, if only to stop the relentless calls. My mum's voice hit me like a wave of fury the moment I picked up. "Violet, what did you do? The hotel says the reservation's cancelled and none of the tours are booked anymore." I let her vent for a moment before calmly replying, "I cancelled them." There was a long, stunned silence before she hissed, "Why would you do that?" "Oh, I don't know," I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe because you decided to take Lauren on my trip. You're lucky I even drove you to the airport." "We thought you'd understand," she snapped back. "Understand what?" I asked, my voice rising. "That years of saving and planning didn't matter because Lauren needed a break? That my hard work meant nothing to you? Guess what, Mom? I don't understand. And I don't care to." I hung up before she could respond, turning my phone off and tossing it onto the couch. The silence that followed was a relief, like I could finally breathe again. If they wanted to prioritize Lauren, fine, but they could figure the rest out without me. The silence lasted all of a day. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing again with calls and messages. At first, I ignored them, spending the day cleaning the house and catching up on work. But curiosity eventually got the best of me, and by evening, I opened my phone, bracing myself for the storm. The texts were exactly what I expected. "Violet, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears and your father is furious. We can't get into any of the hotels you booked." From Lauren, "You're acting like a child. I don't get why you're making this such a big deal. Just fix it already." And finally, from my dad, "We need to talk. This isn't right." I set the phone down, shaking my head. For years, I had been the one to fix things, to ensure everyone was happy and comfortable. Now that I'd stepped back, they didn't know how to handle it. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, letting the anger simmer. How dare they expect me to clean up their mess? How dare they act like I was in the wrong? The next call came just minutes later, and this time, I answered. "Violet," my mum barked before I could speak. "This isn't funny anymore. We're stranded. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" I took a slow sip of my tea. "Embarrassing? You think this is embarrassing? Try saving for years, planning every detail, and then being told you're not even part of the trip you paid for." "Stop being dramatic," she snapped. "Lauren needed this more than you, and now she can figure it out." I set my cup down firmly. "You made your decision, Mom. You wanted to take Lauren instead of me? Fine, but don't expect me to fund her vacation." "We're family," she hissed. "We don't do this to each other." I let out a bitter laugh. "Funny, I was just thinking the same thing." In the background, I could hear Lauren whining. Mom, just hang up on her. She's being impossible. That was the final straw. Enjoy your trip, I said, my tone icy. Oh, wait, you can't, because it's not your trip. It was mine, and now it's nobody's. Goodbye. I hung up before she could say anything and turned my phone off again. For the rest of the evening, I felt a strange combination of anger and relief. Anger that they'd put me in this position, but relief that I had finally stood up for myself. They could call me dramatic all they wanted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't letting them take advantage of me. The next few days were blissfully quiet with my phone off. It felt like a weight had been lifted, giving me the space I needed to think clearly. Free from their constant barrage of guilt trips and accusations, I was able to enjoy some peace. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on the back porch, basking in the calm I'd been craving for so long. My afternoons were filled with work and catching up on little projects I'd been putting off, things that reminded me just how capable I was when I wasn't weighed down by their endless demands. But by the third day, curiosity got the best of me. I turned my phone back on and saw over a dozen voicemails waiting. The first few were from my mom, her voice growing more frantic with each one. Violet, you need to call me back right now. This has gone too far. I can't believe you're doing this. You've humiliated us. We're your parents. How could you treat us this way? Next, Lauren's messages came through, dripping with the same entitled tone she always used. This is so petty, even for you. You're ruining everything. Just fix it, Violet. And finally, my dad's voice, quieter but still pointed. Violet, I don't understand what's happened to you. Call us back so we can sort this out. I hesitated before listening to the final voicemail. It was a long one from my mom. Her voice was quieter this time, tinged with frustration and exhaustion. Violet, she began. We're back at the airport now. The trip is ruined, and I hope you're happy with yourself. Your sister is devastated, and your father and I, well, disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it. Call us when you're ready to talk. I deleted the voicemails without responding. I wasn't ready to talk. And honestly, I didn't know if I ever would. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the culmination of years of Lauren being put first, with the expectation that I would just accept it without question. As the hours passed, I found myself thinking back on all the times I had been overlooked or dismissed. Every holiday where Lauren's whims dictated the plans, every family gathering where my achievements were treated like afterthoughts. This trip had been the breaking point, but the cracks had been forming for years. That evening, Grace stopped by unexpectedly, 2 cups of coffee in hand, and an unmistakable look of curiosity on her face. I heard about what happened, she said, setting the coffee on the table. Your mom called me yesterday. Of course she had. My mum was a master at recruiting allies whenever she wanted to guilt-trip me into compliance. I took a sip of my coffee and raised an eyebrow. And what did you say? Grace shrugged, a sly smile creeping across her face. I told her you were probably busy and would get back to her when you were ready. I laughed, shaking my head. You're the best. No, you're the best, she replied, her tone suddenly serious. Because you finally stood up for yourself. I know how hard that is, Violet. Don't let them drag you back down. Her words stuck with me long after she left. Grace was right. I had spent too long bending over backward, trying to please people who never seemed to appreciate my efforts. It was time to break that cycle for good. By the time the weekend rolled around, I felt an unexpected clarity. The anger was still there, simmering just below the surface, but it was now joined by something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Freedom from their endless expectations. Freedom from being the family's fixer. Freedom to finally live on my own terms. But as expected, the silence didn't last. It was Sunday afternoon when I finally decided to answer a call. This time, it was my dad. Violet, he began, his voice heavy with weariness. Your mom wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me. Go on, I said, leaning back in my chair. He sighed. Look, This has all gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset, Lauren's furious, and it's just a mess. But you're better than this. I stiffened, his words sparking a fresh wave of anger. Better than what, Dad? Standing up for myself? Refusing to let you walk all over me again? That's not what I meant, he said quickly. It's just, you've always been the reasonable one, the one who keeps everything together. This isn't like you. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You're right. It's not like me. Because I'm not bending over backward anymore to clean up your mess. He paused, and for a moment I thought he might finally see things from my perspective. But then he said, You're punishing the whole family over one decision. Is that really fair? Fair, I repeated, my voice rising. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you and Mom decided I wasn't important enough to be part of the trip I planned? Was it fair when you replaced me with Lauren like I didn't matter? That's not what we were trying to do, he said, his tone defensive now. We just thought Lauren needed it more. Of course you did, I snapped. You always think she needs more attention, more support, more of everything. And I'm always the one expected to sacrifice for her. Not anymore. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, he said, I don't know what you want me to say. I don't need you to say anything, I replied, my voice steady. I just need you to understand that I'm done being the afterthought. From now on, I come first. Violet. Goodbye, Dad. I ended the call and set my phone down, my hands trembling. For the rest of the day, I allowed myself to feel everything: anger, sadness, relief. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the beginning of something new. I wasn't going to be the family's fixer anymore, and I wasn't going to clean up their messes. They could figure out how to handle their own problems from here on out. When my parents and Lauren finally returned, I was waiting for them at their house. I'd parked in their driveway sipping coffee, feeling strangely calm as I watched their taxi pull up. As they stepped out, dragging their suitcases behind them, their faces were a mixture of exhaustion and irritation. Lauren was the first to speak. Well, I hope you're happy, Violet. I raised an eyebrow, staying seated on the porch swing. Happy about what? Our trip was a disaster, my mom snapped, waving her hand dismissively like she was trying to brush off the whole thing. We spent the entire week in dingy hotels, eating awful food because we couldn't afford anything decent, and don't even get me started on the tours. Lauren crossed her arms, chiming in, Oh, wait! There weren't any. You know how embarrassing it was to plan something special, something I'd been saving for years, and then you just cut me out at the last second? My dad finally spoke up, his tone quieter but still accusing. You didn't have to cancel everything, Violet. That was extreme. Was it? I asked, folding my arms. Why should I have paid for a trip I wasn't even invited to? If Lauren needed it so badly, you should have planned it yourselves. You're lucky I didn't cancel the return flight. Lauren rolled her eyes. You've spent just as long taking everything for granted. That's not fair. My mum started to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. No, Mom. What's not fair is how you've treated me. You chose Lauren over me, like always. So I chose to stop being your doormat. You didn't want me on the trip? Fine. But you don't get to enjoy the benefits of my hard work without me. I grabbed my bag from the porch swing and turned to leave. I'm glad you're back safely. But don't expect things to go back to the way they were, I said, my voice firm. I'm done. As I walked away, I didn't feel the familiar tug of guilt or the urge to give in like I always had. Watching their stunned faces, though, was a reminder of just how much I had changed. They could be angry, hurt, or embarrassed. It didn't matter anymore. I was done living my life according to their expectations. The next day, I got a call from Grace. How'd it go? She asked, skipping the pleasantries. I laughed, leaning against the kitchen counter. Exactly like you'd imagine. They're furious. Lauren's pouting and Mom's probably trying to figure out how to guilt-trip me back into their good graces. Grace chuckled. I bet. So, what's next for you? I don't know yet, I admitted, staring out the window, but it feels like I get to decide now. Not them, not anyone else, just me. That sounds like the start of something amazing, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Over the next few weeks, I made small changes that felt huge in their own way. I redecorated my living room, swapping out the hand-me-down furniture from my parents for pieces that reflected my taste. There was no lingering sense of regret, just a surge of determination. That money had been meant for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. I closed the spreadsheet with vacation options for my parents and opened a new browser tab. Solo travel ideas. A few weeks after my parents' return, I booked a solo trip to Italy. It wasn't the same itinerary I had planned for them, and it wasn't about proving a point anymore. This trip was for me. It was a chance to celebrate my independence and finally put myself first. That first night in Florence, I opened the journal I'd carried with me for years. I had written about all the things I wanted to achieve, but those dreams were always wrapped up in making someone else happy. Now, as I wrote, the focus shifted. Learn a new language, start a small business, travel to at least 5 more countries. The list grew with each goal, reflecting the life I wanted to create, not the one I'd been expected to live. On my last night in Florence, I had dinner at a small family-run restaurant overlooking the Arno River. As I read a message from my mom, "Maybe we can all talk soon," I stared at it for a moment before setting my phone down. I wasn't ready to reply, and that was okay. This time, it would be on my terms. When I returned home and unpacked my suitcase, placing souvenirs on my shelves, I felt a sense of pride. A week later, I received a call from my mom. This time, I answered. "Hi, Violet," she began, her tone unusually soft. "How was your trip?" "It was amazing," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "That's good to hear," she said, pausing. There was a shift in her tone before she added, "I think we could have handled things better." I sighed and leaned against the counter. "Mom, this wasn't just about the trip. It's about years of putting Lauren first and expecting me to pick up the slack. I'm not doing that anymore." "I understand," she said after a pause. "We're going to try to do better. We don't want to lose you." Her words tugged at something deep inside me, but I had learned not to let guilt dictate my choices. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, my voice steady. "But I'm keeping my boundaries firm." I responded to their calls and texts when I felt like it, but I didn't go out of my way to fix things or smooth over conflicts. Instead, I focused on building the life I wanted. I signed up for a photography class, something I'd always dreamed of doing but never had the time for. I joined a local hiking group and even started planning my next solo trip. Each step felt like reclaiming another part of myself. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't the person who bent over backward for people who didn't appreciate me anymore. I was someone who valued herself, who set boundaries, and who wasn't afraid to stand up for what she deserved. In that moment, I felt truly free.